At exactly 2:13 a.m. local time, the silence over the Red Sea was shattered. The night sky over western Yemen lit up, as a wave of precision-guided missiles screamed through the darkness. For weeks, the Houthi-controlled port of Al-Saleef had been a hive of militant activity. Drones launched under the cover of night, shipments offloaded in silence, and Iranian-built weapons passed through unchecked. But this time, the silence didn't just break. It exploded. U.S. intelligence had been watching, waiting, tracking every signal, every shipment, every vehicle. And on April 14th, after confirming the arrival of new long-range suicide drones, Central Command gave the green light. The mission: cripple the port, cripple their supply, cripple their war. Codename: Operation Thunderclap. They say wars are won with weapons, but the truth is, they're won with information. And that's exactly what the U.S. had been collecting. For weeks, drones and satellites hovered high above the Red Sea coast, silently watching as the Houthis turned the port of Al-Saleef into their most critical stronghold. On the surface, it looked like just another shipping hub. But behind closed doors, it was something far more dangerous. This was the nerve center for drone warfare, where suicide UAVs were armed, fueled, and launched deep into the sea to threaten global shipping lanes. Intelligence reports showed that every few days, small unmarked boats would arrive under the cover of night. Containers would be offloaded quickly, no customs, no oversight. Inside those containers, parts for advanced drones, communications gear, and short-range ballistic missiles, many of them believed to be of Iranian origin. What made this port different wasn't just the weapons, it was the system behind it. The Houthis had set up makeshift command posts, using satellite uplinks, radar jammers, and even thermal decoys to confuse reconnaissance. They weren't just hiding, they were adapting. But that wasn't the only problem. U.S. analysts discovered something else: new drone variants with extended range and heavier payloads. These weren't the same slow, noisy machines from last year. These were faster, harder to detect, and deadlier. If launched, they could reach deep into Allied territories, or threaten entire carrier groups operating in the Red Sea. Waiting any longer meant risking lives and losing the advantage. And so, the decision was made. The moment the latest shipment was confirmed on the ground, U.S. Central Command issued the order. No more warnings, no more observation. It was time to strike, and strike hard. The operation kicked off just past 2 a.m. local time under a moonless sky, where even the stars seemed to disappear behind the smoke. At the heart of the mission were two U.S. Air Force B-1B Lancer bombers flying out of an undisclosed base, each loaded with a full payload of long-range precision-guided munitions. Flying at high altitude, outside the reach of most surface-to-air threats, they were the hammer about to fall. Moments before impact, the silence was broken by the low rumble of cruise missiles slicing through the air, each one guided by satellite coordinates fed directly from real-time surveillance data. The first wave of strikes hit hard, directly targeting the fuel depots, drone assembly hangars, and radar installations that had been masked with camouflage netting and decoy structures. But the technology guiding these weapons didn't care about what was painted on top. It saw through the heat signatures, the shape of metal beneath, the patterns of movement. One by one, those high-value targets lit up the night like fireworks on a dark canvas. The explosions were felt for miles, and a thick column of fire reached hundreds of feet into the sky. The second wave came just minutes later, launched from the decks of nearby naval vessels in the Red Sea. Tomahawk missiles streaked across the water in deadly silence, programmed to hit mobile command posts that had been spotted just days earlier. These were nothing more than pickup trucks, rigged with advanced communications gear. But they'd played a critical role in coordinating drone launches. Now, they were gone, in seconds, erased from the battlefield. By 2:30 a.m., the port of Al-Saleef was no longer operational. Fuel tanks were burning, drone parts lay scattered across the concrete, and every known radar site had gone dark. What had once been a hub of silent preparation was now nothing more than twisted metal and scorched earth. And yet, the mission wasn't just about destruction. It was about sending a message, one that came in, loud and clear. At first, there was nothing but smoke, But it didn't take long for the Houthis to react. Less than an hour after the strike, intercepted communications revealed scattered orders being issued across surviving radio networks. Whatever command structure they had left was scrambling to respond. And just before dawn, they made their move. Using backup launchers hidden deep within civilian areas, the Houthis fired off a small volley of short-range ballistic missiles aimed toward the Red Sea, likely targeting U.S. naval assets stationed nearby. The launches were crude, rushed, uncoordinated, but dangerous, all the same. Yet within seconds of those missiles going airborne, the U.S. response system was already awake and watching. Aegis-equipped destroyers patrolling the sea had been on high alert since the first strike. Their radar systems instantly picked up the incoming threats, locked on, and issued firing orders without hesitation. Standard Missile 3 interceptors were launched, slicing through the sky at hypersonic speeds. Each one met its target mid-flight in a brilliant flash. One by one, the Houthi missiles were neutralized before they ever came close to impact. But the Houthis weren't done. Around 6 a.m., a wave of unmanned aerial vehicles, cheap but deadly, were launched from makeshift pads further inland. These drones, packed with explosives, were aimed at U.S. ships, hoping to overwhelm the defense grid with numbers. But this wasn't a surprise attack anymore. It was expected. FA-18 Super Hornets from the Truman Carrier Strike Group were already airborne, armed with AMRAAM air-to-air missiles, and equipped with advanced tracking systems. The drones didn't stand a chance. In minutes, they were picked off mid-air, each one trailing smoke before tumbling into the sea below. By the time the sun fully rose, the response was over. The Houthis had tried to retaliate with what little remained of their operational capacity, but the U.S. had anticipated every move. It was clear now. This wasn't just a strike. It was a statement, and the message had been delivered. When the dust finally settled, there was no mistaking what had just happened. The strike on the Houthi port wasn't just another military operation. It was a turning point. Satellite images taken just hours later showed the full extent of the damage. What used to be a bustling hub for drone activity, missile storage, and command coordination was now reduced to ruins. The charred remains of vehicles, the blackened outlines of fuel tanks, and the collapsed shelters made it clear. This place wasn't coming back online anytime soon. But the real impact went far beyond physical destruction. The message was loud and impossible to ignore. Any effort to threaten international waters, disrupt trade routes, or target U.S. forces would be met with immediate and overwhelming force. It was a direct warning, not just to the Houthis, but to anyone thinking about stepping into the same fight. And this time, it wasn't hidden behind politics or long-winded statements. It was delivered with precision, speed, and zero hesitation. For the Houthis, the blow was both military and psychological. Their ability to coordinate drone attacks had been severely crippled. Their launch sites and command trucks? Gone. Even their communication between regions had taken a hit, and while some forces remained scattered across the countryside, their strongest point of control had just been wiped off the map. Internationally, the reaction was swift. Military analysts called the strike one of the most coordinated and calculated responses in the conflict so far. Allies voiced their support. Enemies took note. And behind the scenes, defense systems across the region quietly shifted to a higher state of readiness, just in case something else was coming. But for now, the message stood clear. When the U.S. says, "Enough is enough," it doesn't echo through press conferences. It roars through the sky and lands with thunder. Even with the port in ruins and the skies quiet, no one's under the illusion that this is the end. In fact, history has shown, time and time again, when you cut off one head, another often tries to grow in its place. That's exactly why U.S. military leaders aren't pulling back. They know the Houthis might be down, but not entirely out. Somewhere out there, in the hills, in abandoned buildings, or moving silently through the desert. Remnants of the group are likely regrouping, trying to figure out what just hit them and how to hit back. But the next move won't just be about defense. Now that one of their major strongholds has been taken out, U.S. intelligence is shifting its eyes to whatever comes next. Surveillance drones, spy satellites, and signal tracking are working around the clock to intercept any sign of a rebuild, any movement, any communication, anything that could hint at another threat rising. Meanwhile, ships in the region aren't going anywhere. Carrier groups will remain in position, armed and ready. Jets will continue to patrol the skies, and bases across the area, staying on high alert. The goal isn't just to react, it's to stay one step ahead. For the Houthis, the road ahead looks steep. Rebuilding a port like the one they just lost takes time, resources, and coordination. 3 things they're quickly running out of. And with every passing hour, the window to launch another major strike is getting smaller. But if there's one thing both sides know for sure, it's this. Silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes, it just means the next chapter is about to begin. At the end of the day, this strike was more than just a military move. It was a statement. It showed what happens when threats turn into actions, and patience runs out. The destruction of the Houthi port wasn't just about taking out buildings or weapons. It was about resetting the rules of the game. For too long, attacks had been launched from the shadows. For too long, warnings had been ignored. But now, the response has been made crystal clear. Push too far, and the answer will come. Fast, precise, and impossible to ignore. For the people watching from a distance, it's easy to get lost in numbers, names, and maps. But for those in uniform, in the air, or out at sea, every second matters. Every decision counts. And behind every missile, every pilot, and every radar screen is a message. Security isn't something that can be taken for granted. It has to be protected. The battle might not be over. The Houthis might still have cards left to play. But what just happened was a reminder to the world. When diplomacy stalls and danger rises, thunder hits hard, and it leaves nothing behind.